I went to Florida as a visible trans woman. Don't miss out on the fun. Hit subscribe button and join our community for more stories like this one. Here's my experience. I made a Reddit post asking if I would be safe there. The answer was a resounding no. I made the dicey decision of going anyway. I stayed in the Palm Beach/Port St. Lucie area for 5 days. I experienced no direct confrontations or violence, but I noticed several things that are important for anyone to consider if they are thinking of traveling to the area. I counted 3 signs on women's restrooms in restaurants and a private business that reads something like, "Women only, please." Reading between the lines, cis could be tacked onto that statement. The anti-trans climate was palpable. I got way more stares out in public than I have in any other area, living as an out trans woman for the better part of a decade. Some folks started staring at me and didn't stop until I left the area. I was followed around the grocery store. I saw a lot of Confederate flags and even Ku Klux Klan stickers stuck on walls and signage. The political climate is obvious and very pronounced. I overheard people, strangers, talking about the new anti-trans legislation openly in public spaces. Some were for, some against. My point is people are aware and looking for us. I had to use the restroom at the airport and headed to the women's. I aborted my mission when a man started to approach me quickly with a hostile look on his face. Family or unisex restrooms are hard to come by. It's important to keep in mind that trans folks can be criminalized for using any sex-segregated space, regardless of assigned gender at birth. That particular law goes into effect July 1st. Less than 30 days away. I was constantly aware of the fact that if I needed emergency medical attention, I could be denied care because of my trans status. I got caught up in the waves at the beach and probably could have benefited from an urgent care visit. I chose not to because of the new laws. TW. Transportation Security Administration at PBI Airport gave me a very uncomfortably thorough pat-down. The agent put her hands inside the waistband of my underwear. They seemed to be looking for a reason to give me trouble. As a sexual violence survivor, it was upsetting and fear-inducing for me. Trans Floridians who live there, what have your experiences been? Comments. I have family there, and it breaks my heart that I don't feel safe visiting them anymore. For all the fascist bullshit, Florida still has a lot to offer. I love the Everglades, Miami, the Miccosukee/Seminole reservations, the Keys, St. Augustine, and a lot more. Maybe in 10-15 years, as people keep moving there and the boomers keep passing away, I'll feel somewhat comfortable going back. But I'm not necessarily getting my hopes up. DeSantis cares much more about his dumbass little authoritarian evangelical conservative pet project and winning the 2024 nomination than actually governing to improve the lives of Floridians, the people he was elected to serve, regardless of their party affiliation, in a real and tangible way. He doesn't give 2 fucks about anything else, besides his own ambitions. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but keep in mind that there are a lot of people out there that unironically think he would actually make a good president, because they have no policy core, but just wanna trigger the left. Much of Republicans' strategy in recent years, in general. It's really childish and stupid. Don't forget dangerous, honestly. Like I'd sooner trust a 10-year-old with a vote than some of these people lol. This shit should be nipped in the bud as soon as possible. He's already done enough damage in Florida. I'm in Jacksonville, and I'm not out. I still boy mode around, because I teach for my job. The situation is bleak. I've gotten stares when I do girl mode. People are talking about this stuff in public. The saddest is talking to trans kids. Most of them are already beaten down by their parents, and now they don't even feel safe at school. I've been openly disregarding the laws, saying I have to report if a student says they're changing their sexual orientation or gender. My doctor says everyone at the clinic is panicking, not knowing what to do. Hormone replacement therapy for now is effectively banned, because the form required to be signed for trans adults hasn't been drafted yet. They are basically telling us it would be wise to make plans to leave. I don't feel safe here. My only hope now is Canada opens up asylum, so I can go live with my boyfriend. How about moving to a blue state for now? There's Illinois or Minnesota that are safe for queer people and are still affordable. I've been looking at Illinois or Minnesota. I've got friends in Wisconsin that are looking for new apartments, and I've been thinking of moving up there. though Wisconsin isn't as safe. But it's better than Florida. We did get some good news today, as there's an injunction against the care ban, so it's something at least. TSA is not allowed to reach under your clothes. They can only feel outside your clothes, and around sensitive areas must only use the backs of their hands. Reaching inside your underwear is blatant sexual harassment, and maybe even assault. You should at the very least file a complaint, and if you're feeling motivated, hire a lawyer. Very sorry that happened to you. Fuck TSA and fuck Florida. Wait, really? This happened to me once, inside my underwear waistband. I was shaking after. I had no idea they weren't allowed to do that. That doesn't stop them. They did it to me too one time before a flight approximately 6 months after I had bottom surgery, and even touched my genitals. This was at a Canadian airport. I filed a complaint, and a few months later I got a letter from them denying that they did it, claiming there was video evidence that proved I had falsely accused them. I considered taking them to court, but I just didn't have the energy to put into that, so I dropped it. I'm also a sexual assault survivor. I'm in Orlando, which is one of the few blue areas in Florida, and it's a much different experience than the rest of the state. Thankfully, I'm passing enough to not get stared at anymore, and I haven't seen any signs on bathroom doors around here. But I try not to spend too much time out of the Orlando area. Despite that, the wife and I still have plans to flee the state if needed. But I plan to stay and do my part to try and vote out the fascists. I hope you don't have to flee your home. Stay safe, friend. Sometimes those blue cities can be lily pads of sanity and safety in my experience. Thank you for staying and voting. It matters. Same in St. Pete. Our Pride is still going on this month. We don't have the money to up and leave, but we get along just fine still. As soon as I do have the money, I'm out with my wife and kid. Would rather get to grow up somewhere safe. Moved out of, fled from, Florida last year. I could see the writing on the walls for years. Well before I knew I was trans, I knew I'd have to leave. I had a coworker, ex-Marine, at one point who openly talked about and posted on Facebook how he'd personally beat the shit out of anyone in the wrong restroom. I challenged him on that post online. He said that it didn't matter, even if it was an honest mistake. He'd still know someone out for it. I lived in Orlando for my college years. I was part of a Christian community group on campus. It was the very beginning of the modern evangelical movement. We were going to do great things, break down the walls of denominations, and bring people of all backgrounds, cultures, etc. together under one church. After a couple years with them, it was starting to become clear that a very sinister force was at play within the movement. I saw its focus change from multiculturalism and unity to a conservative movement as more and more hardliners on homophobic, sex-negative, pro-life, and eventually anti-immigrant agendas joined up. I left when I realized I was bi-pan. At the end of my college days, I saw things shift farther right. Had friends who became more and more outspoken, especially a couple years later on Facebook, about their antisemitism, homophobia, etc. Cut ties with many of them. That was 2015-2016, leading up to Trump's election. In my new home in Sarasota, things were even worse. Confederate flags on pickup trucks became the norm. I even saw Nazi iconography on some trucks. Not swastikas, but things like iron crosses, AT-8s, etc. This is where I met that coworker I talked about previously. The strange thing was that I met a lot of people there who were pretty left-leaning too. There were a lot of people who didn't give a shit about politics as well. The contrast was pretty weird. I don't think there's more or less conservatives there than most other parts of the country, but they are more outspoken and much more extreme. There's also more racists and neo-Nazis. One of my managers there for about a year was outspoken about his views. He said fascism was unironically the best form of government. He said things like, black people shouldn't be allowed to live in cold environments because they are not suited for it. There was lots of dog whistling from him. Another coworker at the same place hosted a conservative talk podcast, where he ranted about voter fraud and how the 2020 election was stolen, and about how Democrats ruined everything and every Democratic city was a crime-infested shitshow. I assume that's what he couldn't shut up about in the store. Ron DeSantis got much worse after re-election. He knows now that he has the majority of voters on his side and is doing more and more extreme policies targeting education infrastructure, voting rights, racial minorities and immigration, and of course the queer community. He's shifting the conservative vote farther right, galvanizing hate groups. I'm glad I left when I did. Things have gotten much worse over there. I also have a trans mask sibling over there still. They are in a more democratic area. Parents still live there in the same city. I try to bring up leaving Florida all the time to them. Doesn't seem like it's in their plans anytime soon though. Little sibling also says they have a plan to leave if they need to. I think, personally, any plan that involves trying to stay is a bad one. Me and my husband are both trans, been out and transitioning for 5+ years, and have lived all our lives in the Tampa Bay area. We both work in the public school system and are intimately aware of the crap being pushed from all angles. We both go through US Health for our medical care, and thankfully have an understanding PCP. In all my time I've never received outright transphobia from strangers, misgenderings and the like, but no outright prejudice. We don't plan on moving yet. He's stealth at his work, but I'm out and thankfully receive nothing but vocal support regarding all this. Even the people who might be against me are quiet about it. I'm good at my job, a valued team member, and have been here almost 10 years. I try to provide a good example by just living my life. We're scared, though, and incredibly stressed out. It feels like no one but other trans people care about what's happening to us. I live in Florida and will second your concerns. The Trump, Confederate and other hate flags are flown proudly. What concerns me is the combination of hate being encouraged and the firearms. I've also learned to ignore most stares and never, ever eavesdrop on conversations of others. The only Florida airport I've been through recently is Tampa. TSA has never given me an issue. I've had one put down by a male TSA agent. It was quick, but I also have no history of sexual abuse, which is something TSA needs to understand regardless of gender. But I also fly under my dead name passport and dress androgynous. So I wear my white male privilege to the airport. The next time I fly it will be under my chosen name and gender. We'll see what happens. I also know where the gender-neutral bathrooms are at TPA and make sure I go before I need to, in case it's out of order or being cleaned when I have to go. Otherwise, I make sure to use the bathroom on the plane. I would also immediately leave any place that had signs on the women's room. Nothing there is worth my attention. Speaking of flags, I specifically look for pride flags and go out of my way to go to those places. The entire point of all this hate, all this legislation, is to make us as miserable living there as possible. It's so that we can't socially exist in public. It's so that we either hide in the closet or kill ourselves. It's so that they can call us groomers and make us unsafe everywhere we go. The entire point of all of this is to fuck us in our everyday lives. I'm a trans Floridian living in Orlando, which is kind of our Austin, Texas in that it's a progressive bastion compared to a shithole of a state. It's definitely not good and I continue to encourage people to stay away in the meantime. Just don't forget those of us here who can't really leave. I'm a Floridian. I'm not presenting at all in public, specifically for all of the included examples, on top of the fact that I have little to no experience with presentation at this time. I'm also pre-HRT and voice, so that just makes passing in public that much harder. As my transition progresses, I'm sure I'll be braver. I generally try to avoid using the restroom in public at all, unless I can find a place that I can all but guarantee is single occupant or is too out of the way for most people to want to use. Use of a public restroom is reserved for emergencies when I'm out, and I try not to stay out so long that it becomes necessary to use one. Because I go to great lengths to avoid close contact with strangers, I'm practically undetectable and I want it to stay that way, at least for now. It's worth mentioning that I prefer travel by car for the express purpose of avoiding pat-downs and close contact, not to mention the increased risk of needing to use a public restroom, if you choose to or need to fly. Live in Florida. I try to avoid going out. I'm terrified, but I'm having issues leaving. Stay safe. Subscribe and hit the bell button for the best Reddit stories available.